Hi, everyone. Welcome to Bloom in Full Color. I don't know the intro to our tagline, and Jennifer had other things to do. So today it's just me, and this is PJ, our operations manager, and we're going to discuss seed starting today. We're getting itchy. So, PJ, you're passionate about this.
I love this kind of stuff.
I'm going to change my mic here while you talk at me.
You go. So right off the get-go, right? Everything in the garden has to do with your planning. And why is that important, especially with seed starting? There is, for a perfect example, I seed started my own strawberries a couple years ago because I wanted a very specific variety that I couldn't get my hands on. Well, strawberry seed has to be in your freezer for 60 days before you attempt to crack it. If the seed doesn't get vernalized, it won't pop. So you got to put it in the freezer for 60 days, then scratch the seed. Have you ever planted anything? You had to scarify it too, right? So we'll talk about that because I came up with a cool tool for that. My friends helped me with. So you got to do your research.
Yes.
It sounds like it might be early to crack seeds. It absolutely is not. Perfect example of these strawberries. I planted a ever-bearing strawberry that had like a different flavor fruit, right? So I had to go out of my way to find the seed. It takes 60 days in the fridge, and then it's like another 14 or 16 weeks after the seed cracks before you can get it. So it's a long process for that one variety of something. So it sounds like it may be a little early in the year to start talking about this. It truly is not, because depending on what you're doing, depending on what you want, if you're getting something special, it might take you a few months in advance of actually getting the seed in soil and getting it wet to get it going. So one of the cool quotes that I heard, it was on one of the gardening books, is that gardening doesn't start in the spring. Gardening starts in the winter when you start making plans. And that, to me, that is kind of exciting time of year. You get those cool catalogs. You see all these cool stuff. You're like, man, I would love that flower. Well, nobody grows it in your area, so you got to crack it from seed. So it's really the cool time of year to start looking at stuff you want. What could you? The other thing with seeds, guys, is it makes stuff so cheap, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you buy a pack of seeds for $1 or $2, and that's as many plants as you could possibly do. So it is a very cost-effective way to get cool new plants that you didn't have. Now, in some cases, seed stuff, it might take 2 seasons to get a flower out of something. So I warn you in advance, right? You know what I'm talking about, right?
That's a perennial
Perennial,
thing.
right?
Yeah.
So you might take an entire growing season and a vernalization and to get into the following year to get a flower. So plan, right? Because your plan might be, I got to start a seed this year, so next summer I get this special flower, this special canna. So
yeah.
Planning is everything. To me, this is the exciting time of year. I start making the list. What will we like to have? What do I have room for in the garden, right? Because, I mean, realistically, I'm not going to go to all this trouble to have 2 plants. So do I have room in the garden for all 6 or 8 or
the whole
12?
seed packet?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and
Which is rarely the case.
Never.
Yeah.
In fact, I got a seed packet in my garage of stuff that's like 7, 8, 10 years old, which is too old. That's another thing we'll talk about with seeds. Every single seed you buy has a shelf life. So the seeds that your mom gave you 4 years ago that have been in your garage might not be viable. There are certain things that are specifically have to have fresh seed every year. 2 that come to mind for me is onions and parsnips. The seed is only viable for a single year. So if you're doing it for a business, you're not going to play around with old seed. You're going to want to replace. So there are some, back to your planning, right? Do your reading. There are certain things you do. Then there's other stuff that lasts for 5 to 10 years. Now, we say seeds last that long. That's if they're stored properly, if they're not just thrown in your garage, to get hot all summer and cold all winter, right? I tend to take my stuff and put it in the freezer, or not the freezer, but the fridge. Yeah. And I do that because, one, it's a constant temperature, which I find helps any kind of organic material, right? As long as it's consistent. And then what's good about fridges is they remove the moisture from the air, and that's the 2 devils for any kind of seed, is humidity, moisture going up and down, and temperature swings. So I tend to plastic baggie my stuff, put it in the fridge, and then I will go through this time of year when it comes to seed time, and I'm going to go through and I'm going to look at the dates on every one of these packets, man. Not that you couldn't plant a seed that's beyond its shelf life, but what we tend to do with something like that, I'm thinking about onions. If we're typically planting 1 or 2 seeds per cell for onions, and I got old seed, I might then increase that to 5 seeds per cell.
Yeah, and that's
or
the
double
workaround,
it.
I think.
Right, it is a work, especially for homeowners type stuff. You don't want to just throw it away, but just be aware if you got a seed packet that's a little long or past its date, you might want to plant double what you need. Right, I need 12 plants. You might want to plant 50 because the majority of them aren't going to germinate. Right, you're going to end up,
and some of them will, and then they'll get all gnarly and weird. They'll have like seed leaf problems,
Old seed doesn't necessarily do that. That I've, in my experience,
I maybe it's just an experimental thing. I've never learned about that officially, but yeah, I've definitely like planted some old seed and just had them like kind of abort in the seed leaf stage. Like right after they crack, the radical goes down, and then they send up a shoot, and it just like it either doesn't get its leaves. or that you can tell that there's been some kind of compromise in the seed itself.
Which makes sense, because if you think about it, right, a seed is
Yeah.
everything a plant needs to get to its first leaf, which is every bit of food, so think about it. If the starch in there is compromised at all, it might crack, but it only has half as much energy as it needs to finish that cotyledon, right? So this is why, as professionals, we don't play with old seed, because there's too many variables with this. For a homeowner, I just seed more. Okay, this was like a 5-year-old package, and it says it's only good till 4 years. I might just overplant, assuming that I'm going to have a bunch of trouble, right? Although when we talk about seeds, it's so damn cheap to just go get another. It's $2, so maybe it's
like
in your
$3
throw
now,
it away.
PJ,
I know, you're probably right.
$5.
Well, I've even seen it way more expensive than that. Depends on what you're buying,
Yeah,
right?
it does.
So
okay, wait. Got to go back a little bit, because vernalization definition here,
big words,
like reading rainbow here.
Vernalization
is a cold treatment, and it's essentially you're simulating winter for these plants.
That's exactly right. There are certain plants and seeds, for that matter, who will not produce. Perennials are a great example. We grow perennials here that we have to crack the seed, start the plant, then put that plant in a cold room for a period of time so that it will generate the flowers that we want to sell you next spring.
Yeah.
So so there are some seeds that won't germinate if they don't get cold treatment. There are flowers that will not produce. The plant will live. It'll be a plant.
Yeah,
it won't give you that flower that you were excited to buy and do.
Exactly.
And it's just not everything, right? Which not every plant that we grow at Moss's doesn't get vernalized, but there are a bunch. And it's almost always going to be the ones you care about. It'll be the one that you're so excited to show your mom, and that plant won't flower this year.
I have seen it a lot with just like cut flower garden friends, who got all these perennials. They went and they splurged a few $100 on seed catalog,
right?
Starting cutting flowers, and then like a third of them are perennials or types that need vernalized anyway, and so they just they ask me, like, why are these plants green? They are growing so healthy all year. Well, they didn't have a winter for their reproduction cycle. It's just necessary for some things.
Mother Nature needs a rest. A lot of things need a rest, and that's
so
what
again, do your research. But vernalization is the why of your tulips. That's why you plant them in the fall.
Yep.
So that bulb gets vernalized for 50 to 60 days. It needs to be sub-zero basically.
Garlic is another one. You can plant it in the spring, but it does so much better.
All the alliums, right?
Anything bulb-like, I feel like. Right?
Which I think allium is in the lily family, I believe.
Makes sense.
So it's
transplantable
treat
bulb.
that like a bulb. It's not much different than a tulip. We just eat it.
The other thing, and we'll talk about this in all the rest of them, but part of your planting, right, you have got to pay attention to the zone you're planting in. Totally. We typically, and Adam will do this all the time in retail, right? They claim that here in southern Idaho and Magic Valley, we're a zone 6. Everybody that grows plants rolls their eyes and scoffs at me when I bring that up, because it's 6B. But we always tell you, go 1 or 2 zones colder than your area just to cover yourself. In other words, if you're in that seed catalog and you're looking, and don't pick a zone 6 plant to plant here. Pick a zone 4. You're just covering yourself for that one weird winter that we're going to have every 10 years, and your specimen trophy plant's not going to suffer from it. So it's just another way to kind of hedge your bets. Can you get away with it? Yes. Can you go find some old lady in Jerome someplace that's got something that you're not supposed to grow? 100%. But what most gardeners get in trouble with is trying to shove something that doesn't grow there naturally into a spot, and then they're upset because it fails. Yeah. Right? Or you spend 10 years babying something that shouldn't be there to begin with.
That's
right?
fair.
So literally, realistically, this is a way to save yourself a lot of hassle after the fact. Just try to buy things that are a couple of zones cooler than wherever you're planting. Okay. It's just a way to kind of hedge your bet.
So all that considered, I guess if that's our preliminary, like doing your research for all these things that we're talking about, cold hardiness, bloom time, space planning. Cause keep in mind a zucchini plant gets to be like 8 feet across. So read the seed packets. But then what are your next steps, PJ, at home when you were seeding at your house? What's the build for us?
What I ended up doing, so there's a couple of tricks that I've learned over my years. One of the things that is the best money you can buy if you're going to start seeds at home, my opinion, a germination mat makes such a huge difference.
A heat mat, right?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Yes. It's a heating pad for your plants, basically. And what typically will hurt plants in our houses, people don't realize this, right? Your house is 70. That means the soil in your house is in the 60s. Well, there's a whole lot of plants that aren't really happy cracking at 60 degrees, right? Yeah. They need 70s, 80s. So this heating mat is an adjustable temperature. Basically, you're able to seed a whole tray of stuff or whatever, and it just sits on this heating mat. And so it heats from below the roots up. it will increase your germination tremendously. And it's a $20 upsell.
Yeah, you can get them really
So
cheap.
what
on
I did for
Amazon.
myself, and what Adam's asking me is, I sold at farmers markets for a number of years. So I cracked all my own seeds in my house. And I typically would be starting planting seeds sometime around January, because certain things will take 6, 8 weeks, 10 weeks to grow. I can plant broccoli, I can plant cabbage, I can plant a lot of stuff out in the garden in March. People think March is too early, and it is not. We get those beautiful February sunny days and things kind of melt up. Man, I can start getting, if there starts already and they're already a little cold hardy, cabbage can go out on those 20-degree days. I mean, you can put a lot of stuff in the garden early.
I've always worried about that phase, or that like the plug size.
Right.
Because I've been really hesitant to start my own, what do we want to call them?
Pre-starch.
Cabbage.
Okay.
Cruciferous vegetables.
Right.
The coal crops, whatever, they have a million names. But anyway, I've been nervous to go outside with them early, but that's good to know that you get a few seed leaves on them, or true leaves, and then you harden them off.
Yep. You start putting them out. Basically what I do is I'd put them on the porch in the afternoons and let them cool off with the afternoon. I just go get them in there. So about a week worth of acclimating to the outside temps, and I can take broccoli starts outside. In fact, I want them to start turning purple and start looking like that cold.
Yeah.
And then I put them in the ground. Right.
Okay.
And interesting thing about that too is you put them out there and they look like they're doing nothing. They're doing nothing. Their roots are growing. Right. Yeah. So you stare at that little purple thing for like a month and go, should I have wasted my time in March? And then those warm April days come and that thing just goes boom. So people don't realize with plants, unless the ground is completely frozen, plants grow every month of the year.
I have seeds germinating at my house right now.
100%, right? Plants are amazing, right?
I don't know what's going on. I am hoping it's all the puncture vine so I can clear it. But
no, we've had a weird winter, right? Interesting last year with all the snow came early. Snow acts like an insulator. So once it melted at the end of last year, there was so many of the biggest weeds I've ever seen in my life that were just hanging out under the snow growing. So seeds are interesting. They're fun. We talked about one other little thing, which was scarification. There are certain seeds that have such a hard shell that the only way to really get them to crack is to rough that shell up. And one of the tricks my team taught me was we took the scratch part from a matchbook and taped it in a box and then shook the seeds. Yeah. So instead of actually, you're not doing one seed at a time. You're just able to take a package of seeds or a group of seeds and shake them in this environment, and it scarifies them. You're just trying to put kind of a little chink in the armor. Basically, what you're trying to do is you're trying to force that seed to imbibe water. And as soon as you nick that outside shell, I can't remember what the layer is called.
I think it's the endosperm.
Cuticle. Well, see, I think I was thinking endosperm. I thought that was inside. It's been a long time since I did college.
It's been a long time since college too.
So, but back to doing your research, right? If they're telling you need to scarify the seed, there's probably a damn reason. And I say that nothing is worse than spending the money and the time and the effort to do something and then it doesn't pop or it doesn't crack. It will break your spirit. You'll go, I'm not doing it next year because it didn't work.
Do you know of any veggies that need scarified off the top?
The strawberries are the only ones. And no one cracks strawberry from seed except my
Here, let me give you a little lesson here. Scarification is meant to simulate the bird's digestive problem.
Interesting.
It's meant to emulate or simulate going through a digestive tract. And that tracks for strawberries because birds eat 100%. Red berries.
Yes,
anything that, if you're looking to bring birds into your garden, the first and most obvious thing you would do is bring in anything with a red berry. Red flowers are kind of second to that, but so it just tracks. The strawberry is a perfect example of that.
Because that would totally be a bird dispersed seed for sure.
The scarification, yes, like sandpaper in a box, I guess.
That's exactly
Shake it up like when you're cracking your garlic or something. I get that. But we would, in school, to do this, because it was a little easier to get consistent results, is we would actually just bathe them in acid. For a little bit. Yeah,
again,
because that's what you're trying to.
That's the digestion.
Yep.
You're literally just trying to reduce. In my experience, it said sounds like you guys took it. You're just trying to put a little chink in that armor of that outer shell.
So
right,
that outer
correct. That outer coating is there to protect the seed, the endosperm, all that stuff so that when it's there, when the seed needs it, right? So you're literally just trying to get through that really hard outer coating. The minute it starts getting water through that, you're off and running, right? That's what's going to activate the endosperm. That's what's going to get all the hormones rolling.
Yeah. And I think you will see if you happen to overlook that something needs scarified or whatever, you might just keep that seed in the soil or whatever and just give it an extra long time to grow, because eventually the water pressure will enter the seed somehow.
Right.
But you're not going to, from a professional standpoint, you're not going to get consistent germination. You're going to get a couple that crack, and then the rest of them are dormant.
Like shaking it in a bottle. That can't be consistent no matter what, right? That's random.
And I mean, I've had plenty of mistakes in my days, and some flats when I don't get germination because I don't vernalize or I don't scarify because I'm a lazy gardener. I just let those flats sit out for another winter.
Right.
And then I just get this nice,
beautiful second round. Hey, lazy gardening is
the
a beautiful
year when
thing,
I don't need it to happen. So
we're running close. I want to ask you a question because I want to know your input on this, right? So I see a lot of people that like to crack their seeds in like wet paper towels or in a baggie.
Like the elementary school trick is
right. 100% the piece. That drives me crazy. And I just say that because I feel like you're setting yourself up for failure because there's a lot of things that can break, right? You got a single root, you got a single cuticle coming up. Like it's pretty easy to damage that. So to me, I'm asking if this is something you would suggest.
Yes and no. I think if you're doing it to get kids excited about plants,
to look at something,
hell yes.
Yeah, I totally get that.
And I'm also thinking of like really tough things.
That's what I was saying. Something crazy
can't
hard.
Be killed. And I'm trying to think of what that even would be. Like a radish is the first thing that comes to mind. Like I don't think I've ever killed a radish. I don't know that you can. Or a beet. Yeah, maybe even tomatoes and peppers because they tend to transplant pretty well too. But what you're doing by adding that step and not just immediately growing in the soil is you're adding a transplant to that cycle, which a transplant, like the time it takes, the labor it takes, your time, is not only the only thing, but it's also that it takes a couple weeks for a plant to really start actively growing after a transplant because those root hairs get damaged
100%.
and then it has to establish new hairs before it can actively grow again. So less is more. The less amount of times you can transplant your seedlings before getting them to the garden is ideal. You don't want to start something in a little plug this big, this is about the size of a quarter when I'm holding my hands up here, and then move it up to like, say, a 4-inch cup and then a gallon and then into the ground just because you didn't plan correctly. That puts a lot of stress on the plant and you're just not going to see a lot of active growth in that kind of format. But honestly, PJ, I think we might have to do like part 2 with this.
No, I like it.
Starting.
I like it.
That concludes our podcast for the day. We encourage you to live life in full color because plain is pretty boring.
Super boring. Thanks for being with us.
Like, subscribe, comment, talk to us on Facebook. We love you all.
Thanks.
Cheers.